and everything. I want to welcome everybody to tonight's meeting. It's great to have everybody here. It's great to see everybody. I know that we're talking to each other in the virtual world and everything, but thankfully we have this, and so that's nice to have. I also like to welcome. We've got 6 new members that have joined since our last meeting. If they're tuned in with us tonight, that's great. We would like to welcome you. Normally, if it was one of our in-person meetings, you would have to stand up and share something that was very embarrassing to you sometime in your lifetime, but we won't have to do that this time, so we'll go past that. For tonight's program, we have our own Barbara DiMattio. She's going to be giving us a talk on when's the right time to squeeze the trigger of your camera when you're shooting wildlife. And we'll come back to her in just a little bit here after some announcements and everything, but it sounds like an interesting program, and we got a little sneak peek back on Monday, and it looks really good. So, all right, going forward here, just want to reiterate some housekeeping items here. Most of you guys already know this, but as you've seen, I've muted everybody. That doesn't mean I don't want you to talk or anything like that. So if something comes up and you really got to get it out to us and everything, by all means, go ahead and unmute yourself and let us hear from you. But the reason I do the all mute is that sometimes we forget that we're not muted, and sounds in the background can become very distracting and everything. So that's why we do that. And because of that, when it comes time to asking questions and everything, it makes it a little more difficult. So what we're asking for you to do is to type your question into the chat window. You should see a button at the bottom of your screen. If you click it, it says chat. If you type your question in there, we've got a couple of moderators, both Sean and Matt, who are going to be taking those questions down. And at the very end of the presentation tonight, they will ask Barbara those questions that you have. So Barbara's asked to wait until the end of her presentation to take any questions, so we'll definitely do that. But if you have any questions that come up, make sure you get them in on the chat. Etiquette-wise, as far as online etiquette and everything, I think we're getting used to this a little bit more. Just remember, if you unmute yourself, that we can see and or hear you, and that may not be a really appropriate time or something for you. I know that we were having a family get together once on Zoom about a couple weeks ago, and my stepfather adjusted the camera on the laptop, not knowing it, and it was shining down between his legs for a good period of time. So he was wearing pants, so it was all very good and everything, but just be aware of what we're doing and stuff. Quick reminder, this meeting is being recorded, and I'll be posting the video probably the next day or so up to our Salem Digital Photography, Photography Group web YouTube page. I'll also send that link out to everybody. Just one second here. I need to remember to get myself a drink of water. But anyway, I'll post that link to everybody so you can go visit that, and in case you wanted to see the video again. Okay, upcoming events. We have our Salem Digital Photography Group Hangout tomorrow night at 6:30 on Zoom. Rick, I think that is your baby. Did you want to say anything about that?
No, not really. Just if you want to hang out and chat, ask questions, it's pretty informal. It's not structured at all. So come on by, meet some friends, meet some old friends, some new friends.
And this is our second one, right?
Yeah. Yeah,
okay.
The first one went pretty well, and everybody said this was fun. Let's do it again. So I scheduled another one.
Great.
If it keeps being fun, we'll keep doing it.
Sounds like a plan. Okay. Thanks, Rick. And then next Wednesday is constructive photo critique. our monthly photo critique for July 15th at 6:30. Jesse or Laura, I'm not sure if you guys are on board with us tonight. Doesn't look like. So just remember, if you want to submit a photo, send that to Jesse via email, and we'll critique them online through the Zoom meeting. I've been to the last couple. It's been really nice. It's a great way to do that. So looking forward to that. Currently, we have our Woodburn photo show going on right now. We only have 2 participants who joined this time, and I think part of that is because of the COVID. The gala reception that was scheduled for July 11th is canceled, but the artwork, the photos are up. So if you do get a chance and you're over at the Woodburn Art Center or in that area, stop by. Both John Desjardins and Captain Alexander have photos up displaying. So they'll be up throughout the entire month of July. Okay, next meeting, our next regular meeting will be next month. I think it's the 15th. Don't quote me on that. Check here real quick. Sorry, the 12th, August 12th. And I believe we're going to have Britt Anderson giving us a discussion. So before we move on to Barbara, for any of our organizers, do we have any announcements? Okay, it doesn't look like we do. I did want to mention too that we're cutting back a little bit on our in-person get-togethers. With the coronavirus kind of taking the wrong turn, if you will, it was discussed to kind of limit our even the loosely put together events for the time being. Not saying that you shouldn't get out and get photos or something like that, but from a club standpoint, we are not going to be posting those right now. Hopefully those numbers are going to start coming back down, and Max does a great job of monitoring that and kind of keeping us all busy and everything. But for right now, we're going to kind of curtail that for the time being. So hearing no other announcements or anything, I'm going to turn this over to Barbara, and she's going to take it from here. So, Barbara. And let me unmute you, Barbara.
Myself, right?
There you go.
Okay.
Yep.
Now okay, so now I am now on the screen up in the corner, right?
That's correct.
And okay, so now I can start with my video, etc.
Yep.
A little bit about myself. I've lived in Pennsylvania, Naples, Florida, and I grew up in New Jersey. And now, for the last part of my life, I'm here in Salem, Oregon. And my photography reflects all of those states. There's a little bit of everything from all those states that are different. Each thing you see, you'll think, oh, we don't have that here. And I can tell you that for a fact, because when I came here, I never saw so many beautiful flowers and fields full of trees that had blooms on them. It was just gorgeous. So it's a photographer's paradise here as well as other places. About my shots, I do grab shots only. I never do anybody posing or anything. I don't use a flash. I only use natural light. And over the 35 years past, I would say I've probably been through 5 different brands of cameras. And it'll show itself, although you don't realize it when you're looking, that no 2 camera brands have the same color saturation, and no 2 brands seem to have the same clarity. It's really interesting. You buy a camera, you're thrilled with it. And then you're so happy the day you buy another one because it has all the things that you didn't have that you thought you had. So I'm back to Canon, and because I now have carrying problems, as you all know, physically, I have gone over to a Canon It's the size of a Rebel. It's surprising that it is that big, but it does not have changeable lenses. And yet it shoots from 20 up to 725. And it's amazing. Things that are, last night I shot well, it was an osprey nest, but a baby osprey trying to fly. And everybody there decided it was probably 300 feet away. And there was an osprey next to him that you could see it opening and closing its bill. So I'm only telling you that because photography has become more and more professional, even by being done by a beginner. And so that's kind of hopeful and it's kind of fun. So to go on now with my show, I think that the best way to go about it would be to show you that just like people, animals, birds, whatever, have priorities in their day and in their lives. The first priority with all of us is food. And so the first part of my show, although I'll be telling you other things, I will tell you now that I go to places where I think they will gather for food. And then that's one less thing I have to worry about. And sometimes it's a little contrived, but most of the time it's by chance that they come upon the place that I think they'll come for food. So with no further ado, I will now try and figure out how to move this and bring it in my show. Okay, and with that, it should start. Uh-oh, let me get this out of the way. And my first shot should be on everybody's screen, is it? Okay, I'm assuming so because you guys are now not able to speak.
Yeah, no, it looks good. It looks good, Barbara.
Okay, so we're good. This little green heron has the most beautiful coloring. But if I had taken pictures of him at 10 in the morning or 3 or 4 in the afternoon, he would not have looked like this. I know the habits of birds of that color and know that their best colors show up in what we call the sweet light, meaning about an hour before sunset, the sky and the atmosphere take on a gold and pink tone. That's when you want to shoot birds that have the warm colors because it reflects most like the colors that are in the atmosphere. So you go to where you think that baby little green heron's going to go for his food, which is down in the swamp. And the boardwalk over in Ankeny is a great place for little greens. And if you go there at that time, you'll sometimes be very lucky, as I was with this one. And with no further ado, now we go on to the hawk and the prey birds that go from hunting high above the ground, looking for something like a mouse that's 300 feet away because their vision is just so tremendous. You'll notice that he's like crouching down. The reason is because he's about to fly. He has to crouch in order to create that thrust, to be able to fly up and then zoom down. So now that you know that, your first shot that you take, hoping that you'll get others, but you take the shot of him crouching. That's a good shot to take. The color in this one is not the best because the weather wasn't the best. So certain things like that, you'll notice. I have to be careful in taking a shot. Am I taking it because I like the shot? Am I going to teach with it? Or am I going to just enjoy it? And this one I took to teach with because it was a perfect way to show him crouching. Now, once you have that shot, he has to wait a second to think about where he's going. But you know, he's headed in that direction. In other words, he's going to go up and out. And he's going to go up, if you had a clock in front of you, he would be going up toward 2 o'clock. So you leave him and you refocus at 2 o'clock. Now he takes off and he is now going to be in your shot because you aimed at 2 o'clock and that's where his eye is. and his eye is always where you want to look. The shadows and the glare in this, as I said before, the weather was not the best. But for teaching purposes, he did exactly what I was hoping, which was up. Now, this is another hawk coming down to catch his prey. He has come down out of the tree. He's folding his wings enough to be able to come down. But if you look at his feet are getting set for landing. And those are the things that matter when you take a picture of a bird. What is his stance? Because once you know his stance, you know where he's going to head next. And you always should be ready to take the next shot. So, with no further ado, by the way, I was downstream from him, and that was a scary feeling. So now we go to a different kind of atmosphere. When a deer is looking for food, you always should go to where the food is most prolific. In this case, it was apple season. They don't like to eat rotten apples on the ground. So you should go around an apple orchard or somewhere, peaches, pears, anything like that. And there certainly are a lot of them here in Oregon. And just kind of hang out. And when it's like 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock in the evening, they'll come through sometimes in a herd looking for food, and they can certainly smell it. So you get some really good shots, hopefully headshots like this is, and be very careful to focus, in this case, on the fruit itself, because it's kind of cute and kind of funny that this deer right in front of you is choking down an apple. Incidentally, the average bird or animal, if they actually have the food, they don't really care much about you, and you won't really stress them that much because they're only interested in the food itself. And this is a good example. Whoops, I jumped one. I'm sorry. This is a roadrunner, totally carnivorous, and he can't fly very well. He flies like a chicken, like 3 feet. So he gives you lots of opportunities to watch him. However, you shouldn't go too close to them because you are something that a carnivorous bird would just love to get. I watched one kill a squirrel. They're no fun. But I think he's the funniest looking character. And I love the fact that he had all these caterpillars in his bill. And I also had a shot later of him running down the road, evidently taking them back to the nest. But something like that, you kind of luck out. This one was an owl that caught a dove. Him catching the dove was like with a swipe. The poor thing was walking on the ground and he just nailed it. It wasn't a pleasant shot to do, so I didn't feature it in here. At one point, he noticed me and thought I was going to grab it, which I would never have, but he thought so, and he kind of came at me, so I backed up. And as I was backing up, I was taking shots, and I thought this shot really showed a lot about wildlife and all that they have to think about. The reason I featured this thistle is it is the main food of goldfinches, red finches, and house finches. It's in its immature state, and that's how I wanted it, only because I think that's when it really shows the word thistle with all the points. I used, in this case, to reflect a foil reflector, and my friend Vicky, faithful Vicky, who I always shoot with, held the reflector so that we could get all the points showing. When this would show later, if you ever saw all the finches gathered around a thistle, they would starve if it weren't for those things. So people that cut them down when they're in their yards are really taking away a bird's food. And I'm not great on landscape shots. I've never been happy doing landscape. I always feel like it needs a point of interest. In this case, I liked the landscape because it had lots going on in it. And I don't think that bullseyeing, and I wasn't trying to be facetious with that, I'm sorry, but the animals around the windmill for water, to me, showed a purpose. It had clarity. The animals kept clarity. It was shot with a 50 millimeter. And it was probably 4 o'clock in the afternoon in Texas. And they are coming in because the females that are further out probably are coming in, you know, for milking or whatever, I don't know. And the main purpose of this was to show that I can do a landscape. It's just not my favorite thing to do. The sky is totally washed out. But in order to get the dark in the front and the light meadow in the back, there was just no other way I could put it all together. Now we are on to the next thing after food is finding a mate in every species. So the buffalo in Yellowstone are excellent subjects for that because they sure are plentiful. However, if you take one of a buffalo standing there, it's kind of boring. So you look for one that is going up a slight hill, not a big hill, but just an incline, because he has to change his stance. And when he does, he begins to look really ferocious. This one had just finished a fight, and I watched most of the fight, and he was the victor. So he's feeling his oats. The thing you have to be careful about with this, number one, of course, get behind your truck so that he doesn't get you, but is finding a gray card area so that the grass becomes as light as you can get it, and the darkness in his face still shows detail, which is very difficult to do, and to get the catch light in his eye. So the best gray card I could find was up here where his fur has not yet molted off. If you find them in the winter, the whole animal is covered with that. And they molt it in chunks. You see it against trees and all in the park. So trying to get detail in black is quite difficult unless you really get a good gray card area. For those who are watching that are not really into photography, the palm of your hand is equal to what we call a gray card, which is the number 21 on your lens. Okay, so now he's looking for a mate because he's victorious. And these eagles mate for life. And this mated pair were waiting for us to get our boat out because to them, the word boat means food. Most fishermen throw whatever's left of their bait into the water and they kind of throw it at the eagles. Well, this eagle's really angry because we were going out, not coming in. And so he's hollering at us. The idea on this one for learning to shoot something is to get the color yellow is very difficult. And I have no idea of why. But when I could shoot film, yellow was not a problem and red was not a problem. However, when we went over to digital, those two colors lost their saturation. And so the only way you can get the saturation, at least in my opinion, is to turn down your color, your lighting, sunshine thing, 3 or 2, whatever. Make it a little darker than it has to be, but not too dark, because if you go too dark, you lose the feathers. So it's just a matter of toying around, playing with it until you get enough saturation in the dark to get that yellow out there as a highlight and still be able to retain the feathers. This mated pair has a nest of babies inside. I only know that because I waited for 3 hours while they both finally took off and a baby stuck its head out and looked around. I would have shown you the picture of that also. I would have shown you 1,000 other pictures, but I had to draw the line somewhere. And so I couldn't show you the baby hanging his head out of the tree looking straight down, and I would love to have. However, I think the main thing here is learning catch light in eyes. Making sure that you don't play around and one has a catch light and one doesn't. Or that you create a catch light and it's in a different part of the eye than the catch light is on the other bird. That you must be careful of. The blue sky in the background, I was lucky that day. I wish there were clouds, but the clarity of the sky really played off the red. And the red in this, by the way, this is a very old picture and it was shot with film. And you can see instantly, to get that color now in digital is a real fight unless you do it in Photoshop. Now in the mating process, there's a delicacy that's very difficult to capture and still make sure that you have a composition. And the reason I say delicacy is he's carrying to the nest a twig that is so thin. And if you look at her, she has a feather in her mouth and one down the end of her mouth here that she's going to put in the nest. So in the creation of the nest, everything is very light, very special. This one was taken after digital became something special. And I was amazed that you could see a toenail and you can see little delicate feathers all through here in the female. So I think that in this case, the white against a blue sky also has a play of its own that you have to be careful to get. And to try and get detail in white is something that means shadow, playing with shadow. And the best way to play with shadow with something white is to do it in the cool part of the day, when the sky is reflecting the part that's so glary. I don't know any other word to use, but 11 or 12 at noontime, that's when you want to shoot birds with blue and with white, the cool colors, because then you're going to see the shadow from the feathers and you won't see the yellow so much. There's some yellow showing in him. I have a feeling that it was dirt, to be honest with you, because I don't see it anywhere else on either bird. So learning to shoot at the time of day that best accents everything around it is important as well. These two bugs, we have had more discussions about, me and Susie every night. Are they climbing up or are they sliding down? If you look at their feet, they look like they're sliding just like you'd slide down a banister. But in reality, they were probably climbing up. So much for that part of it. The main part of it is that you know when to shoot them. And this would also be in the cooler part of the day, where the light has not quite turned yellow, but it's maybe 4 in the afternoon or 5, so that you have warm in the greens and the nice bright yellow on the bugs, which you would hate to lose, but also enough reflection on the black to show all the detail that's in there. So that's a Florida bug that does not look at all like I'd want to get much closer to it. Incidentally, that was with a 50. And the only thing I didn't like was that it let me down on the outside edges because it didn't stay as clear as I thought it would on the greens. So in order to get a macro feeling for the bugs, I had to give a little on the greens. This is almost a joke. This salmon jumping the waterfall to go back home to breed would probably went through 2 rolls of 36 to get 1 or 2 shots, because there's no way that you can tell ahead of time when a fish is going to jump out of that water. And it becomes a joke because whoever you're with, you can hear them muttering and you can hear them eventually cursing, and you end up laughing because every time you think you got the shot, you get home and you look and you don't have anything but tails and noses and in some cases, no fish at all. But I just put it in there as kind of a little comical thing. I was going to turn it to a black and white. However, it's not a sepia tone and it's not a black and white. Those are the actual colors that were there. The water is very murky and swampy and has a lot of cedar in it. And that's why the dark yellow gold tea color is there. This bird is a good example of what I've said about hawks and birds of prey and shooting ahead. He gives you plenty of time to shoot ahead and have him in focus. When I saw him coming, he was over, well, back 3 bird lengths is the best way to put it. And so I did not take a picture. I moved my camera ahead of him. So he flew into my picture. And the minute I saw his beak coming into the picture, I started shooting. When you have something like this, set your camera on burst, which is that little runner or dancer or whatever it should be, and hold your shutter down and just let it go. Because one of those will be the perfect shot. When you do that, he's moving. He's moving fast, and so is your camera, because you haven't moved an inch. Stay very still and just let the camera take care of it and just keep hitting burst. And I think you'll be happy with your results. Incidentally, that's a bird that he's carrying, which is kind of gory. This is an interesting bird as well. This is a killdeer. It's a mother killdeer, and she will put on a show that is unbelievable. There's her head. She wants you to think she's dead. First, she flies up in the air, and she's going on all these antics, and her wings are falling down, and then she falls on her back. She's doing all this to deflect you from looking at her baby. But the minute you see a killdeer doing that, don't bother to shoot her. That's your good chance to shoot the baby. There's the baby. I thought that he really looked like he has on a hat, a fur collar, and a jacket. Baby killdeers always strike me funny. They're all legs and not much body. Then go back after you've shot him, and then you shoot her. And at that point, she's not much to see. But the main thing is that you got both birds. You would never have gotten the baby if you had stayed with her through her many different antics. Now we're going to do something that's somewhat of an experiment of mine that I did. And since then, I have repeated it with other birds. At 10 o'clock in the morning, which gives you the blue tones, I went to a great blue heron rookery. And this baby great blue had just been hatched. I mean, literally just. And as you see, it's not much to see. But the light is coming strongly from over on the left side, and it really shows up the feathers. Now you'll see, to stay with it, 1 week later, well, no, 9 days to be exact, I went back to the nest at the same time. You'll notice that the light has changed a little. It's a little higher. And this bird, of course, is sleeping. And there's the other one. And they have grown tremendously and totally changed from that funny looking thing you saw before. Be careful that you try and stand in the same place that you stood when you took that first shot, because it's interesting to see. A great blue stands probably close to 4 feet tall. And all of that's going to happen in 6 weeks, which is amazing. Okay, so now we have, this is 3 weeks old, the 2 brothers, and they're waiting for the mother. But I'm standing in the same place, and my light now at 10 o'clock is coming from the high left. In that, you will notice that the birds themselves are also more reflective of the light because their bills now have a harder surface. They're no longer the jellyish beginning that they had, and much has changed. Still, I stood in the same place. Unfortunately, that particular day, it rained and stopped, so it was very unpredictable. Now, we're at 4 weeks old, and the mother is feeding one of those babies who is almost as big as she is. And you can see again at 10 o'clock in the morning, the light is now coming from the top corner. And I only keep telling you that about the light because light is what photography is all about. If you had photographed these same birds an hour before sunset, when I had first photographed the little green heron, their colors would have been much different and not attractive, kind of a muddy look. And so you don't want that. You want the clear look that they have. And their feathers at this point are more pin feathers. They're not really, they're coming in pretty rapidly, but you still need the color that comes in later. And now we are at 5 weeks old. And the reason that they are both looking to one side is the mother always flies to get food to that one side. And they are no longer confined to the nest. They are now strong and big, although you'll see this one is much smaller. It also was obvious that the mother really fed this one a lot more than she fed that one. Now your 10 o'clock sun is really strong. And now you see blue. You don't see anything that looks murky. However, the one thing that stuck in my mind was, I wonder if she's coming back. And that is what they were wondering too. They stood that way for probably 2 hours, and then she came back. In reality, she was training them to, let's leave and fly, guys. And here, they started to realize when she was gone, they better stretch their wings and get ready to take off because she's not coming back. Now you see the light is very strong and their colors are very dark. It's hard to tell if that really is their color because I was shooting with a Panasonic that I was not at all happy with. And it didn't do what I was so used to doing with my Canon. The colors to me seemed murky and they didn't show definition the way that the Canon seemed to do. And I had a lot of trouble with fixing lenses to suit me. Down here it was too dark, too bright. Up at the top it was too dark. And their last shot, they're gone. And the mother is cleaning out the nest because she will have another brood before the year is out. And you'll again see that everything about here, the light is what matters. So I just did that to show that if you go back to the same place, first off, it's a good idea to do it before she even hatches so that she gets used to you. And when you arrive next week, she's not so likely to take off. She sees you, she recognizes you, she knows you're not going to come any closer, so she'll stay. When the babies see you, from the time they're little, you become part of the scenic atmosphere to them. So it pays you to do something like that because the familiarity of you from the birds gives you shot ideas that you could never before get. This is something that I did not expect to have happen. I was in the Amish country in Iowa, and I went to turn around in a driveway, and the blue door caught my eye. And most people say they shoot through the lens. Well, TTL, through the lens, TTL. I do TTW, through the windshield. Well, this was through the windshield. And I saw the little girl out of the corner of my eye and thought, I'm getting out of here because if she's Amish, I'm violating her. And so I did. And when I got back to my camera being unloaded and everything into my computer, the blue door and the little girl together fought with each other. It was two equal points of interest. And you don't want that. You want one point of interest. You can have a secondary one, but it can't be as strong as the first one. And in this case, if you go back and look, the 2 points of interest are equal. If you had these two in a picture together, even if you cropped it out, it would still be fighting. You wouldn't know where to look, and you wouldn't really be happy with it. And so I gave up the door. If the railing wasn't there, I might have stuck with the door. But I gave up the door. I had to give up 1 point of interest. And then I became really happy with what I had, because the chicken was something I didn't even notice when I was in the driveway. I had no concept that there was a chicken. I was so shocked when I put it in my computer and up came this chicken. So you do have some pleasant surprises. Getting skin tone to be a natural looking skin tone can be difficult and it can be very tricky. In this case, the skin tone becomes your gray card. It is the nearest thing because, of course, when I said about the palm of my hand, the color of her face is perfect card 21. So with that, we ended up with a finished shot that I was totally happy with. Now we go into there is time to play. That's part of life as well. When you have a deer run across in front of you or run beside the road, you always stop. Number one, because it might hit your car. And sometimes it does, as we know recently happened to a friend of mine. And whenever there's one deer, you stop for the reason that there's going to be another deer. So you stop, turn off your key, wait a second, and sure enough, either a baby or a mate will come across. And deer tend to run in bunches because there's always one buck and many in the, like you would almost call it a harem. And then after that's all over, then you'll have a mother with 2 or 3 babies. So the mother came across, and I stood and sat and waited, turn off my key, and first one baby came, and then the next baby. I wasn't ready. And so I was still focusing where she went into the woods. You can see it split right here. And of course, they're headed where she was. And by the time I realized it, I got their back view. And then I kind of liked that back view because it showed them playing and frolicking. And if they were coming toward you, you would not have exactly that same feeling. So it turned out they're playing in daisies. And these are whitetails, by the way. I don't think in Oregon that I have ever seen a whitetail. I see more mule deer. But the babies with the whitetails flapping up in the air, I think it was a perfect day for that particular shot. I put this in not to teach with, but because whenever my friend Vicki and I are out looking for eagles, somebody will say, "Did you ever see swans down there where you go in Tangent?" Yes, we see them all the time, but they're always in one place. If you are familiar with the Albany area, go on, and people have asked me for this, so that's why I put it in here so that you'd know. You go down Peoria Road and make a left onto American Drive. The swans come in twice a year, in the spring and again in the fall. And they'll hang out maybe 3 days. And they rest from their long flight from migration. And they're eating as well and just kind of pulling themselves together. This was with a wide angle lens. And I would say that this bunch back here, plus all that are here, are probably a couple hundred swans. But this went on both sides for probably an eighth of a mile in each direction. Just amazing. And with mountains in the background, it's just a great place to take a shot. And the swans, it's the only place I have ever seen swans in such great numbers. This, to me, just was the kind of shot that all the women look and go, oh, isn't that sweet? There's nothing redeeming about it, nothing special. It's just a bonding that grabs your heart, so they say. I really was testing my new camera, and it did well, because this was about 200 feet out. And all I did was aim and shoot, and there it was. It's very clear. Every little hair is showing. I couldn't have asked for more. So with that, that showed more than just bonding. It showed a camera that really lives up to its expectations. Now we're to the point of rest. Every animal needs shelter to sleep. And he is sleeping on his back. I know it looks like he's swimming frontwards, but he's not. He's on his back, and these are his feet. He also breaks clams on his stomach or whatever, and he's a sea otter, as I'm sure you figured out. The reason for this shot was to show what do you do in a situation where you have so many different things going on at once. A density filter that is gradual density works well for me. The darkest part of the filter, and you can see it's grainy, it's very old, it was with film, and my gosh, I can't even tell you what camera it was. But I was only trying to show you the gradual density filter works well with the darkest part at the top. And most pictures, of course, the light's at the top because of the sky. And then working your way down to the lighter part at the bottom. If I had used just a regular lens, a regular filter, I'm sure that he would have come out a much lighter color and nothing that would be as dynamic feeling as this one, where he's snoozing with his eyes closed. And this is the last picture of an eyes closed. This is a baby owl. And I wanted to tell you that owls, if you really like to shoot owls, go to Alaska. I think it's because the light in the summertime, of course, never goes into darkness. And so the owls have, I guess, a confusing kind of life because it's never totally dark for them to hunt. And I have seen them hunting in broad daylight. And I've never seen so many types of owls as in Alaska. But it can't be the kind of thing where you go in and 3 days later go back out on the boat. We actually we took our 32-foot fifth wheel, dragged it with a 1-ton truck from Naples, Florida, up through America, into BC, up the Alaskan Highway, into Alaska, and stayed there for 2 months. And wove in and out of every little harbor and woods and everything else. And that's the way, really, to see the wildlife of a country. Would I do it again? No. I thought British Columbia actually was way more prolific with bears and owls and moose. So the scenery was basically the same, and so were the glaciers. But in reality, I should only be talking about this picture, which is a baby owl, and he's sleeping. And I did not magnify anything in this picture. This is straight out of the camera. So with that, he's sleeping for a reason, because it's the end of my show. And
All right.
Okay.
Very nice. So, Barbara, that was great. You can go ahead and unshare your screen if you'd like.
How do I do that?
It should be like
Oh,
stop
share.
share.
Stop share.
There you go.
I got it.
Yeah.
Okay.
And
I closed my
and so that was great. I really enjoyed your presentation. Some awesome photography and quite a few things that I'm going to start looking for. I'm going to throw it over to either Sean or Matt real quick to see if we have any questions. But I just want to remind folks, if you have any questions, now's the time to type these in so that we can ask Barbara about her presentation. So Matt or Sean?
Can everybody hear me okay?
Hi, Matt.
Hi. Earlier, Paul asked about the bull and windmill landscape photo, if it was tripod or handheld.
It was handheld in a moving car.
Handheld in a moving car. Oh, cool. That is the only question that I saw.
Ah, well, it shows 7 chats on here. What
So,
what does that
I'm not sure what that is, but we're kind of running through different things here. Now, Barbara, you did mention to me on Monday, I think it was, that you said that you do a lot of your photography now from your car, whether you're moving or not moving. Do you use any kind of a steady rest or something like that in the window, or do you just something like a beanbag?
Well, I don't think that you ever have the same position twice, because wherever the critter is that you're trying to shoot, you know, you can't say, I'm going to use a beanbag because I know it's always off to my left, because that is just ideal. It doesn't happen that way. Actually, when I was shooting yesterday at this osprey nest, I had a first aid kit that I had laying next to me, and it was squishy. And it was the only thing I could reach with one hand and still keep my camera where I wanted to keep it and not lose sight of what I was doing. And I just grabbed it, stuck it on the side of the window, and laid on it. Other times, I have problems like with that sheep and the baby. The dashboard actually is what made it dark at the bottom. And that was a TTW through the window. So, you know, I wish I had a beanbag or something like that, but in all practicality, whenever I've had them, they don't serve the purpose. They're either too big or too small or whatever. And you just kind of lay your one hand on the window and lay your camera on top of it or whatever's handy. Sometimes your jacket. It's never been a big thing with me on equipment.
Okay. So for the group, I mean, do we have any other questions? You can unmute yourself too if you want to ask directly.
It must mean they were bored with the show. Nobody has any questions.
No, I think just the opposite.
You think?
Not at all, Barbara. That was very good.
It was. And I'm not a wildlife photographer, and I found it interesting. But I have a question. How long do you usually stay in one spot when you're shooting?
Depending on what I'm shooting. If there's something I'm really excited about, like the great blues with coming back every week, I usually would stay there an hour and a half, because I would plan my day around that particular day that I was going to do that.
Okay.
And so I would stay as long as it took me to get what I wanted. But if I were walking a boardwalk and saw something like that little green heron, and it was near sunset, I don't have the opportunity to stay longer because the sun's going down. And a boardwalk in the woods is not a smart place to be. But if I see something like that, I might stay there 10 minutes, 20 minutes, hoping that something else will come along. When I'm bored, I leave. Or if I see something else up ahead, I just take off and go for it. Unfortunately, I'm now at a point physically that I can't do all those things anymore. And I'm confined to actually shooting from my car, or from just stepping out of my car and using it to lean on, because I'm sure all of you know I'm now on crutches and oxygen, and it's kind of hard to do that and take a picture. So my my priorities have changed tremendously. But just to still be able to go out and shoot is well worth it. My daughter took me to a field of the most beautiful purple flowers the day before yesterday, and I was able to get out and lean on her car and take the shots that I wanted. So that was a special treat, and I wasn't afraid to get out because I wasn't by myself, and I knew that she was there for me. So things change. You get old, and your world gets smaller, and then you're just happy with whatever you got. So that's the best answer I can give you.
Well, I've heard another wildlife photographer talk about how well the car works as a blind. That sometimes it's better to be shooting from a car
Yeah,
than to be out on your feet walking because you are less of a threat. So
that is true.
you know, the car can be an advantage in that sense as well.
And I found something else out. If you're confined to being in the car, being in the back seat is much better than being in the front seat. Because if you're in the front seat and you have the console in the middle, you are stuck in your seat. You can't move. But if you're in the back seat, you can slide side to side. Whatever's going on with the birds or that deer or whatever, you can just slide across the seat and do that side. You can do it out a front window on an angle. I find that to be much better. Although people wonder like why you're in the back seat by yourself. It doesn't matter.
Just give your driver a little cap. It'll be fine.
Yeah. So,
Where was this field of purple flowers?
oh my gosh. Oh, I'm not good with that at all. Karen,
Okay.
and my daughter is recording it because she has a commitment tonight. So I don't think she's even on to be able to answer.
All right. Well, I'll call you tomorrow.
I can tell you that it was somewhere near the Ariel Winery in that general neighborhood.
The what winery?
Ariel, is that the name of it?
I have no idea,
Okay.
but I'll call
Well,
you. Never
did-
mind. Never mind. As Lily Tomlin used to say, never mind. Never mind.
Well, we did stop and have a glass of wine. That's why it was important. So anyway, it was out there somewhere in Polk County. That's all I can tell you. So any more questions? I think that probably wraps it up.
You were talking about the sitting in the back seat. I was out with Catherine shooting one time up at Ridgefield, I think it was. I was in the back of the van. We had both side doors open. I was on a mechanic's seat, and I had my camera on a monopod. I'd be shooting like this. I'd turn. I'd shoot like this while she was driving. I was in
Great.
the side. I needed. It was awesome. Not so much for her, but
If
until it got really cold, and then I had to shut the door.
if
Really fun.
Huh?
What's really fun is sometimes I'll go up through the sunroof. My wife will drive
Oh,
out
what a
in the
great
back.
idea.
It's like having a turret.
That's a little bit dangerous.
Very Ansel Adams. Very Ansel Adams. He used to climb on top of park his car and climb on top of it.
That's pretty.
Or-
I'm gonna have to add a little disclaimer at the bottom of the screen that, you know, don't try some of these things.
Right.
Yeah, don't do that at home.
Professional driver only.
Right.
Good way to kill
Professional
yourself.
photographer only, right?
Oh, very-
I think my program might have been shorter than you expected, but I have learned along the way that if you become really involved in your program and it goes on for an hour and a half, people are so bored. And I would much rather have it short and people wishing for more than the opposite. So, and if you're
Well,
in our
we
meeting,
strive for quality over quantity, and you delivered that today, so we really appreciate it.
It
Well,
was
the
just
meeting-
right.
Yeah,
you always told me in the meetings, limit it to half an hour.
I agree with
So-
Carol. It was just right. That sounded like Carol's voice.
No, that was me,
Oh, who's me?
Sharon.
Aaron. But you've disappeared. You're now just all gauze, Sharon.
I know. I have a filter.
Okay,
Do we have any other questions for Barbara before we call it a night, folks?
I have a question.
Okay.
Why didn't Barbara give us this presentation when she was our neighbor in Yardley, Pennsylvania?
I think
Thanks,
that's a
Bart.
personal problem.
Barbara, you're looking
great.
Yeah, the answer might not be appropriate for this group. You'll just have to wait.
Well, I have to be honest with the rest of the group. The man that just spoke was with me on the board of directors of our local lake. We lived on a private lake, and we used to bat heads and we did all kinds of things, but we're still friends, and that means a lot.
Yes, it does.
So,
Thank you.
and you're still on the board. I bet you money.
No, well, almost. I can
And I
explain it.
haven't lived there in 20 years.
Yes.
So,
To change the subject, I think I mentioned before, we have doves who nest on, I have a little balcony. It's, I don't know by feet, 3 feet wide maybe, but we have doves, I think Barbara knows this, that nest in one of our flower boxes, and these doves nest right across from the front door. So I set up my idea of wildlife photography is sitting at a table with a glass of wine, and the tripod is there, and I just wait for these birds to do something. Sometimes I'm there long enough that it's a Sony, so the battery goes dead. But if I just keep changing the battery, I can sit there all day, and it's just, there they are right in front of me. No long lens needed. It's just like,
we should tell
okay.
you that Madeline is from Manhattan, or from New York City somewhere.
Well, I grew up on the beach, though, so there is a difference there. I grew up on the
Oh,
beach in
okay.
New York, so there was wildlife.
But you're not.
This is like right here. I don't move. I go to the refrigerator. That's my idea of wildlife. The wildlife has to come to me.
So, I thank everybody for coming to my show, and it was a learning experience that now I could do it in no time flat compared to what it took to do this first one. And I learned a lot and I enjoyed it. So I had told Greg I would never do another one, but now I take those words back.
There you
I
go.
would.
You have to do another one.
Just
I'm
so
signing
he's
up.
on the other end.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Barbara. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. And please be safe over the next month or so, well, forever. And please stay healthy, and we'll hope to see you here soon again. So thanks for joining us. Thank you, Barbara.
Thanks for putting this together.
All right, bye-bye now.
Good job, Barbara. Yeah.
Thank you.
And thanks, Greg. Bye, everybody.
goodbye.
Have a good night.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.